this is a special topic, and you are all really special for being here to hear about it. And I hope Bill Muma is okay. And I also just want to put in a pitch that anything you all can do to help us with our expenses of getting Precious here, and then even helping to fund her organization, would be awesome. Because I really believe it's a sort of a pivotal organization in the future of this planet, because they're reversing deserts, and I'm going to show you some more of that. And being kind of just going with the flow right now here, but I hear the word livestock used a lot, and this isn't really about livestock. It's about restoring ecosystems, and livestock can be a proxy for the wild herd impact that grassland ecosystems evolved with. And in a much part of the world, they're just are integral to the livelihoods of those people. So that's just a fact. But I got into this because of climate. I mean, I'm a climate activist, and that's why I got into this. So I thank you all for coming here tonight. And I just want to speak a little bit very quickly about my background. One of my earliest mentors in this area was Donella Meadows, or people that knew her well called her Dana, and she wrote this book called Limits to Growth. How many people are familiar at all with this book? So this is like a generational thing, because like in the 70s, 80s, everyone knew about this book. It was really a shot heard around the world, and it was they said that we can't go on the way we are forever. We have to change, and I also was very influenced by this man named Buckminster Fuller. How many people here have any idea who Buckminster Fuller is? Okay, good. And the Africa Center for Holistic Management won the Buckminster Fuller Challenge Award in 2010. So that's really great. And he called himself an anticipatory design science revolutionary. And that's the headset we have to be in now. We have to be that. We have to be anticipatory design science revolutionaries, and we have to redesign how it is we act with our ecosystems. And there are several sort of key messages that I want you to get tonight. But one is this idea of holism, and the sort of the practice that Precious talks about is called holistic management. But it's the idea that it's not just the sum of the parts. There's something qualitatively different about a whole, and reductionism can never tell you about it. The whole just is what it is. And water is the perfect example. You can look at hydrogen and oxygen forever and do every study till the end of time and never know a single thing about water. And what we're trying to say is that climate change, biodiversity loss, and desertification are this whole. Those aren't separate topics. It's just one topic. I don't even know what you call that topic. And this actually was the best way I could find to explain it as it relates to grasslands or savannas, which is where most of this work is being done. This is an ecosystem. Where do you draw the line? It's not just about the animals. You can see the buffalo, and it's not just about the plants or the bugs. It's just all of it. And it's not like the rain is just coming down on the land. The land is making the rain. It's all one thing. But you do get the sense when you look at this that when it rains, the water is going to be captured in the soil, right? You all kind of get that sense. You don't think, oh my God, the water is going to run away. And then, so I became aware of this program where Precious works a few years ago, where they are trying to use livestock as a proxy for the type of animal impact that the great herds used to have. And in historic times, there were so many more wild animals than there are today. I mean, the landscapes were totally covered with animals, and no one, and they weren't overgrazing. There were so many more of them. They were dense, and they were constantly moving because of predation. So it's something about that behavior. Lots of animals in tight groups and moving a lot that is part of how the ecosystem evolved that it needs. It's not just numbers, it's behaviors. And so I went there in 2011, and I went back again in this year. And then this is this part of Zimbabwe where the program is. And this is me being initiated into the, no, well, actually, I was teaching them to dance like the Radio City Rockettes. And when I left, Precious said, "Oh, Seth, we were thinking of you in the American dance." So saving the world can be fun. So I think Precious showed you this slide, but what she didn't say is that the healthy property has 4 times the livestock density is the highly degraded property. And these pictures are taken on the same day and in neighboring properties. And I'm sorry, density is not the right word, it's stocking rate. So it has 4 times the stocking rate. And the conventional wisdom is that, oh my God, you look at the property, the degraded property, and you say, animals did that. These areas haven't had animals on them for decades. A lot of these places have been like this. So it's not just about numbers, it's about management of them. And their thesis, which I believe has been borne out, is that if you manage them differently, you can be restorative, and if you're restorative, then you're capturing carbon. That's how I got interested in this from the carbon side, but the more and more I get into it, I realize it's really about people and food and livelihoods. I mean, the fact is, no one really cares about carbon. You know, we care because we're in Cambridge and we're climate activists or whatever. But you know, once you get out of here, no one really cares. They care about food, soil, the nutrition, water. They care about water. And certainly the people in these villages, they don't care about carbon or global warming or any of that. But they care about water. And so that's really what this starts to become about. Okay, I'm just going to start to show you some examples and just try to move as quickly as I can. So here's a typical barren spot. It's in Zimbabwe, but it could be in most of southern Africa. It could be large parts of China, India, United States. Barren land, and they might say, oh, well, it was overgrazing. Well, it may in fact have been overgrazed at one point, but there hasn't been animals there in decades. So the treatment that Precious talked about is to bring the animals all together in this thick mass called a kraal or corral. And on one 7 to 10 day treatment, okay, so the ground is pretty much 100% bare ground for decades. So the very next year, the land is, you're starting to see growth. Now this is an annual. This is the first type of grass to dig in. Now this is 2006. It's only 2 years later. It was like that for decades. And in 2 years, by introducing animals, they've reversed desertification. Now, what do you have here? You have cover. This gets back to what Judy Schwartz was just saying. Now when the water goes, it stays in the ground. Okay, so this provides millions of benefits. Now, I went back there earlier this year, and so now there's me at that same spot. And you can't necessarily tell the difference in this picture from this one. It probably looks the same to you, but at this point, I already can see the difference. There's cover here, but it's not 100% cover. And by cover, that means that if you look down, you don't see the dirt. So when you look across, you see the plant sticking up, but the real cover is when you're looking down And if you have to get down on your knees and go like this to get to the dirt, then that's dense cover. So we're 2013 now, they did the treatment in 2004, so it's 9 years. So after about 9 years, you saw the annuals came in right away. Right after 1 or 2 years, you begin to see the annuals. But it takes about 9 years for the perennials to start to come in. So they're starting. So now, in nine years from now or whatever, everything's going to be covered with perennials. Now these are deep-rooted plants. So you're seeing a profound transformation in the landscape. And then, so the perennials are an indicator species. And I say this is a positive tipping point. We always hear about tipping points being negative. This is the opposite. This is a positive tipping point. But after a certain point, the land starts to really kick into high gear in terms of its own restoration. And then people who are familiar with the climate change parlance, it's a game over. I like to say the game is starting. This is an example of the game starting.
Clarifying question, Seth?
Oh, George, who invited you here? Yes, go ahead.
Was this just one treatment?
Yes.
So it was 1 year, they put many animals on there for a week,
Yes.
and then they haven't gone back in the next year, and the next year, and the next year.
Well, okay. So what happens is the intense shot, so to speak, is that one treatment. But then once there is grass, now it's part of the grazing plan.
All right.
And then when Precious showed the grazing chart, now at first there's not a lot of grass, right? So they're not there for long, maybe a day. But as the grass comes in, they stay longer. It just becomes part of the grazing plan.
And the grazing plan is an annual cycle or a seasonal cycle?
In Zimbabwe, it's seasonal, because you have the wet season and the dry season.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it would be in the wet season and not in the dry season?
Well, no, you might go both. You might do both.
All right.
I don't want to get into the details of the grazing plan, but in answer to your question, it's one quick shot, and then it's management after that. Okay.
So this picture here, this tree is that tree over there, and then the other one there is that tree behind, and the other one that is almost a bit far away is the other one that side. Then this forked one is that one with a ladder on top. And of course you have these, which are these ones, and this one, the other Mopani tree is there. So this is the 2004 photo where it has been just bare all over, and later on in 2007 when there was ground cover, and now at the current situation, which is totally covered now.
And how did it get this way? How did it improve?
This place has been bare for the past 30 years, and what we did is just brought the animals to sleep overnight, crawled them overnight for 7 days, and then moved off. And then the following year, grass started growing. So it is more of the concentration of the livestock or the animal impact that actually revived this place.
There's a question from my father over here.
Are the perennials animal food?
Yes, absolutely. No more questions. Oh, and now I have what I call the my futurist telescope. Now you can really see. So here's just another very similar example, but in this case, you can see the fence in the back. Can you see it? Yes. So they'll put about 500 animals in here. Oh, and that's just a marker. We call this the elbow site. And then so it says 1 week later. So see how it's totally covered now? Go back. That's before. That's after. And then that's 2 growing seasons later. So all of a sudden the process starts. But once it starts, it has to be brought into management. So the real acid test is how does it look many years later. So that was 2009, so 4 years later I went back. Now you can see that's just complete thick cover. And I actually think there's a perennial just starting right here. One. Oh, and then here's my futurist telescope again. Okay, and then here's the river restoration. So this is called the Dimbangombe River. It's called the Dimbangombe Ranch. And the star marks what used to be the high water point in the dry season. Okay, so these are very specific indicators. Most tributaries dry out in the dry season, but there's always a point where it doesn't dry out. So that's called the high water mark for the dry season. So that star used to be the high water mark in the dry season, and the elephants are there because they called it elephant pools, because that's where the elephants would bath. But this area along the river is called the flay. And so they did this management all up and down along there, creating more and more cover. When you change the cover, you change the hydrology. So now, 1.5 kilometers upriver and an elevation of about 10 meters is now where the high water point is in the dry season. So
Seth,
there's
you
year-round.
can point on if you want to point, can you just point?
Well, it's just a top star. By the way, in TED training, you're taught never ever to turn your head and look at the projection. So I'm just going to look forward and try to describe what I So, does everyone see the top star? Okay, so that's the new high water point. And so this is what it looks like on the ground. So you're driving north upstream. That's me in the reflection there, taking the picture. And this is new year-round pools, where there didn't used to be. And they used to run pumps here for the livestock, and now they don't. Completely counterintuitive. They've actually reduced their need for pumps while increasing their stocking.
The change actually started in 2009. Mm-hmm. That's when we actually saw some pools in different places. Then 2010, then it was flowing almost continuously. And this year, well, with even expanding sidewards. That's very encouraging, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Especially for some of us who started when we were pumping water for wildlife. We had 2 places to pump water for wildlife, across the Dimbangombe Flay and just near the railway station. And at first we were convinced that this really makes sense, but we were not sure if we were going to produce the results and so when the results actually came, they took us by surprise.
And so you don't need to pump the water there anymore?
There is no need of pumping water anymore.
So you had 2 pumps and now you have none?
Yeah, we have none. Except we only pump water for supplying people.
Not for cattle?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Land restoration is not a quick fix thing where you just act today and tomorrow everything has changed. It's a process that happens over a period. First, the animals trample on the land, and then a little bit of grass grows, and it increases bit by bit. But as the conditions change or microenvironment changes, other plant species begin to appear. And so this is what has happened actually with the reeds. It didn't just happen overnight. It took quite a number of years, and then slowly you will find that you have dotted reeds here and there, and they increase. Even this grass that loves wetlands also appears just as dots here and there and increases in volume, and the other species dies off. And this is what actually happens with the land. Tell me about
where we are and what these plants are that are surrounding you.
These are just the normal reeds found in the rivers. They are water-loving plants. And if the land is dry, generally you will not find them much. But in wetlands, you will find them a lot. And because we have changed this place into a kind of wetland, and this is why they are actually increasing and going. They are actually growing further upstream.
What did this area used to look like?
She used to have tall grass, the thatching grass a bit, and then bare spots all over. But now the bare spots have disappeared, and as you can see, there's more water underneath than bare spots.
Okay, so you see, he's talking about that land used to be thatching grass, and now reeds are coming in. So there's actually two successions we've seen. First from bare ground to the annuals, then from the annuals to the perennials, which become the thatching grass. And then, if it's done long enough, and there's enough moisture in the ground, you'll actually start to get reeds and water plants. So that's complete reversal of desertification. And then this is just a quick kind of schematic of what's going on here, getting back to the carbon piece. The carbon gets into the ground through photosynthesis, through the perennial plant roots, which can be 15 feet deep. The more carbon that's in the soil, the more it holds the water. The more water that's in the soil, the more the water table is replenished. And then the higher the water table, the more surface water, and the longer into the dry season you have surface water in seasonal dry areas like Zimbabwe. And I have a lot of slides here, but I want to just go to some key points. But basically, grassland ecosystems require a ruminant impact in a certain fashion. And that fashion that they involved with was intense, large herds, tight and always moving. And they're essential to that ecosystem. That gets back to the holism again. It's not animals and grass. It's all one thing. In a natural environment, there is no overgrazing, and overgrazing is actually human invention. We invented overgrazing. And in a natural ecosystem, animals, grass, and soil just work together. And in pre-European North America, there was 35 to 75 million buffalo, which probably deposited on the order of 1 billion pounds of manure a day. 1 billion with a B. 35 million pronghorn, 4 billion prairie dogs. Think about that. That's the whole. There's no such thing as a prairie without that. And so this is a mountain of buffalo skulls. If you look under the man's foot at the bottom, he's standing on a buffalo skull. And if you look at under the man's foot at the top, he's standing on it. This is about 3 stories high and about a football field long. There's probably millions of buffalo skulls in here. Each one of these would have been a 1,500-pound animal or so. So I'd like you to realize that this is not just buffalo genocide, which it is obviously, but it's also the end of soil. And it's the beginning of desertification. Because soil needs animals. And then about 30 years, 40 years later, that picture was probably taken around 1890. This picture was probably taken around 1930. You have the Great Dust Bowls. So is there a correlation between the animal genocide and the death of soil? And this now gets back to what they're doing in Zimbabwe. Look how dense the herd is. They keep them together and they're always moving. They're constantly moving the corral. They have a grazing plan. They have the grazing chart. So Precious talked about all this. The grazing plan is at the right place at the right time for the right reason. So this is completely unlike conventional grazing. There's no comparison at all. So a lot of the criticism, people just hear grazing livestock, and they make all these statements about how bad that is, which is true, without doubt. But the point is, it's also true that you can do something very differently and get completely different results. And in fact, you have to, because you can't bring back the land without the right type of animal impact. And the right type of animal management is inconvenient. You know, we don't want to do all this work and move them around. Well, a lot of things are inconvenient these days. Okay, well, these are the crop fields. This is what Precious was talking about. So instead of bringing the manure to the crop field, you corral the animals where you want the crop field to be. And then what you can see here, you can actually see how that little corral has moved. Can you see the lines? There's actually 3 separate plots here. That was the actual corral itself that they moved, and this will be the crop field. Oh, okay, so Precious showed you some of those slides. Okay, so let's get back to the climate and desertification and all. So this is a typical thing. Coahuila, Texas. This is just south of Big Bend. This is typical. And he actually started doing the treatment in 1978, even though this picture is from 1963. Now watch. This is the exact same landscape. Can you see in the distance that sort of hill? You see it still in the distance behind that tree? This is the exact same landscape. In this transformation, the stocking rate is twice what it is. It's gone up, not down, but it's gone up with management. Now, what's going on in this picture is this is a trough, and just off to the right of the picture is a dirt dam. And this just captures runoff because the water can't stay in the soil. So this is a 1-inch rain. Now, here's a question I like to ask. Which picture has more water? Okay, Class A. Which picture has more water? Oh, really? But I see water in this one. Okay, this is what's called green water. Blue water is on the surface, and then the groundwater is the water table. Green water is the water that's in vegetation. And the owner here of this property says there's at least 6 times more water in this picture than this one. And the reason why they know that is because a 1-inch rain would fill this trough. But he can have a 6-inch rain now and not have standing water in the depression. That means all 6 inches of the rain is being absorbed. So it's not only the reversal of desertification, but this is also mitigation of global warming. Here are just some other examples. This is from Namibia, very low rainfall, about 9 inches a year. These are perennials. So somewhere between here and there, the annuals came in, but we don't see it. This was a project in Livable, which no longer exists, but it was an independent territory connected to South Africa. But you can just see it plain as day, and many more livestock on the upper part of the picture. And what you see there, that kind of white, those are the annuals beginning to come in. That's after just a year or 2 of treatment. Now, these pictures were taken on the same day last month in Mexico. This is typical property. There's no grass here at all. It's just shrubs. This is 3 miles away. This is a nice mixture of biodiversity of annuals and perennials. This is 3 miles away. You think the rainfall is different? You think the ecology is different? But this is a land that's using what they call the holistic management, about twice the stocking rate that's recommended for the area. So which side gets more rain? This was a study done at the Jornado experimental range that the Department of the Interior or one of the federal government runs these experimental ranges. And in the early 60s, they excluded livestock. They said, oh, we need to just get them out. So they literally set up an exclusion. So this is 40 years of exclusion. There is no livestock, but mind you, there's no anything else either, right? These fences, I mean, none of the big animals can get in it. Maybe small animals, but none of the few remaining large animals can get in there. So they don't know what caused this desertification. And here's from their actual report. Livestock have been excluded from the site in the 1950s, but the processes resulting in the replacement of grasses with shrubs continued. So they don't know what the processes were, and if you read the report, they have a whole bunch of theories. One is global warming. But you see, there's two things that are happening here. One, grass is replaced by shrub, but the other more important thing is that there's all this bare ground now. There's desertification is going on. So the obvious thing that's going on here, once you know what to look for, is that there's no animals. It needs the animals. Now remember the picture I showed you before, the Mexico treatment? Okay, this is, so the Jornado plant, that's southern New Mexico. This is northern Mexico. These two spots are quite near each other. And just a coincidence, this is exactly the same time frame. Exactly the same time frame. And in the top picture, you have livestock exclusion on a government-run lot. In the bottom series, you have stocking doubled on a holistic management lot. And so there you go. There's Jornado, and that's where that Mexican ranch is. And then this I love because I just have to say that if you only remember one thing about tonight's presentation, remember the first one with the globe, and I said holism, and remember this picture. Because this picture is everything. This is the metaphor for everything. I mean, what do you see here? Let me just ask the audience, what do you see? What's on the left? Okay, so what's on the right? Desert. Okay, so what would you call the left? You would call it maybe the Karoo grassland, and then what would you call the right? The Karoo desert. Wasn't it nice of them to build that fence right at the border? So, oh, come on. Hang on. So on the grassland side of the fence, carbon and water are going into the ground. On the desert side of the fence, carbon and water are leaving. So, which side gets more rain? I mean, all the literature is very clear about this. Rain is the #1 factor in determining the health of land. So it's really just amazing that it happens to rain more on one side than on the other. Now, there is this fence here. I have a name for this fence. I call this the paradigm fence. On one side of the fence is one paradigm, and on the other side of the fence is another. And that paradigm affects everything. It affects government policy. It affects debates that go on today on the 350 MA list, which I'm on, and a lot of you have seen those debates. It affects our future. We need to figure out how to cross that paradigm fence. Which side do you prefer? Okay. I apologize for not getting to this part of it more quickly, but the potential here for grasslands to absorb carbon is enormous. It's just absolutely enormous, and it's really maybe the topic of a whole another discussion that I wanted to get into, but just very quickly, the play here that we want to do is we want to move. If you look at the bottom of the chart here, in the desert areas, you're looking at 25, 50 tons carbon per hectare. A hectare is 2.5 acres, so just divide by 2.5, and you get the you get the number per acre. But you can see that 25 tons per hectare is a is a range in which you begin to see a change in biome. And the type of pictures that you've seen, those type of transformations, that's that transition from semi-desert to grassland. And you know, when you look in the literature and you look to see how these areas are classified in terms of their carbon content, it's about a 60-ton carbon per hectare difference. So from extreme desert to semi-desert / scrubland, from that to tropical savanna, it's about a 60-ton per hectare delta. By the way, I was told not to use the word delta, so I just violated that rule. And then, then in another source, it's about 80, but in the DOE source, it's about 60. And so, you know, so my thesis is between 25 and 60 tons of carbon per hectare define that transformation either way, either from a healthy grassland to a desert or back the other way from a desert to a healthy grassland. And then Ratan Lal, who's the most noted soil carbon scientist, says you do see a new equilibrium in a change from 20 to 50 megagrams, which is a ton per hectare. So I did my own investigation. It turned out to be right in the ballpark of what one of the leading soil scientists says. So that becomes the opportunity. So it becomes a 25 to 60 ton per hectare opportunity. And I'm just going to run right past all this, but basically, this is what I think the potential is here: 35 to 312 gigatons C, or 40 to 147 parts per million CO2, through a worldwide effort to restore grasslands. And just finally, how we think about the future. This is a New Scientist article, cover article from a few years ago. This is the narrative. This is the other side of the fence. This is what you hear all the time. And they just talk matter-of-factly about a 4-degree warmer world, as if we could live with that. And that's a fallacy. We can't live with that. And but look at this. They're saying Western Australia. They're saying this will be a good cropland down here. That's what that means. And then geoengineering to the rescue. It's all geoengineering approaches. Nothing about biological approaches. And so I was so furious, I just made my own cover story. So this is the power of a little imagination in Photoshop. And how to restore promises century. This is the conversations we have to start having. Water tables replenished, vast new grasslands. Again, which do you prefer? Which side of the fence are you on? And, okay, so now I'm going to be a futurist. This is a real picture that I took earlier this year in Zimbabwe on the land right next to the Africa Center for Holistic Management. This is the Fuller Forest. This is land that they intend to get under management. They may already have, actually. But can you already see now the transformation that's possible? Watch. That's a completely possible reality. That can look like that in 3 to 5 years. Uh-oh, now I'm getting close to home. Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, government protected property. That's what Chaco Canyon should look like. And it has to look like that if we're going to solve climate change. And new face of climate heroes. Can ranchers be considered climate heroes? Thank you very much. This has been very good.